Welcome. On the occasion of the 50th anniversary of Aspen Chapel, we are delighted to be here to share a conversation about spirituality. Our spiritual beginnings were rather surprising and unusual because we were founded by a Mennonite bishop who believed there was no one true church and that we are all one. He envisioned a chapel for all, non-denominational, the chapel of peace. We have grown spiritually to a community of openness, understanding, conversation, community outreach, and service. And what might our future hold? The possibilities are endless, and a part of our conversation today. I'm Shelly Merriam, the historian for Aspen Chapel, and I'm honored to be here with these two gentlemen. Nicholas Vesey, our current inspirational spiritual leader of 5 years, and our past spiritual leader of 36 years, Gregg Anderson. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm interested to know how each of you found your way to Aspen Chapel and what that path has been like. Nicholas?
I was ordained in the Church of England in 1997, and I ended up in Norwich, and I served as a minister in Norwich for 14 years. And they say in a church, Gregg is an exception to this, but they say in a church that if you leave after 3 years, it's too soon. After 7 years, it's just about right. 14 years, you're lucky. 21 years, they want you to go. So I've been there 14 years, so I thought, well, where do we go next? So my wife and I went away, and we went to a hotel, and I said, where would you like to go? And she said, well, I'd like to go somewhere airy. So we'd been to America. I'd worked a little bit in New Mexico. And so I said, let's look at the American Episcopal website. And we clicked on the website, and there was Aspen Chapel, number 2. It's not an Episcopal church,
right,
but it was on the website. So it's internet dating, really, for spiritual leaders. So I clicked on that, and I looked down the list, and it looked really very sort of similar to the work that I was doing. And I saw the name Cynthia Bourgeot, who I'd worked with. So I thought, well, perhaps this is a goer. So I clicked on the link, and 3 phone calls, a couple of Skype interviews, and a plane ride later, we were being interviewed for the job, and that's how it came about, really.
Well, wonderful, and welcome.
Thank you.
What intrigued you, though, about the spirit of the Aspen Chapel, the definition, really, of what it is and where it is and maybe future challenges?
Yeah.
What intrigued you about that?
What intrigued me is that the chapel has its roots in the Christian tradition. But when I looked at it, I noticed that really there was an enormous amount going on in the branches. All the big wisdom traditions were represented. Buddhism, Sufism, they were all there within the community of the chapel. I thought that is interesting. They're interested in the wisdom rather than just the traditions of Christianity. And, when you're a Christian priest, particularly in America and in England, you pretty much have to stay down, the trammels of those lines, and you have to mention Jesus a few times. Otherwise, someone comes up to you and says, well, you did the whole sermon, you never mentioned Jesus once. But at the Aspen Chapel, you've got the freedom. I mean, for me, it's really about how do you live life more skillfully? And how do you find within the wisdom tradition the understanding of how to put your life into practice? And that was just fantastic to me. There was such a great freedom to explore. And that's really been a joy in being part of the chapel.
Well, we realize that too. Thank you. Welcome. And Gregg, 36 years. You were here from almost the very beginning.
Back in 1885.
You were in the Donner Party, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I came over, and I was the first one over Independence Pass. I actually had been coming out to Aspen. I think the first time I skied here on family vacation was when I was 5 or 6 years old, and came out here almost every year to ski. And then family had a vacation home here, and my brother and his family were there. And I followed him out when he kind of took a break and semi-retired. there, and I thought did some school, and I thought, well, I'm going to take a break as well, and come out to Aspen and do a little skiing, and that was back in 1972, and I actually I was always interested in religion and psychology, and I had a couple of degrees in that, and I ended up, I was supposed to apply to law school as my father insisted. Literally, he had gone to law school. I didn't have to be a lawyer, but I had to go to law school and then he went into business. So I took a break, and within a week I was helping with the community church here, which is Methodist, and restarted a mental health clinic. And I did that for 6-7 years. But I was fascinated in the chapel. I was aware of it. I become friends with some of the people who were partially involved with the chapel. And then they were looking for somebody else. The person who was kind of managing things there as a part-time director was leaving. And I said, I could be interested in this. And that was 1978.
Wow.
And I would like to say I got there because they were seriously desperate for somebody. They didn't know what to do at that point.
Exactly.
If you build it, they will come, or not. The first 6 or 7 years, there was a bit of a challenge for them for various reasons. So anyway, I said I would love to give it a try, and there was no one connected with the chapel at the time. And I thought, well, I can only go up. I can't really go down. And I came as a director. I had no intention, even though of being a minister, even though I was interested in religion, and the community of faith in Aspen. Even though it played in terms of population, it played a fairly minor role. The churches all were doing a good job, but in their neighborhood, in the denomination, with a fairly small membership for each of the churches. And I thought something more had to be done, something broader, something bigger. And the chapel was an open slate.
So you were up for the challenge.
Yes.
Little did you know, 36 years.
Yeah, and I did some more school after that and became ordained. But they were not thinking of a clergy because that would be too narrow in the perspective. So that's why I was more of a director. But then they realized that I was so much into the interfaith and ecumenical aspect of it that I was never going to, try to curtail it into one particular denomination, but always be open.
Well, you were the right person at the right time.
Well, it ended up.
And
I'm so grateful.
Yes.
I identified with their purposes, and we just started doing some things, and some people started to come, and each year we've had a little bit of growth.
I came about 5 years ago, just as you were ending your time, as the spiritual leader, and Nicholas was coming on. And I was new to the Valley, and my background is that I was raised Methodist and then Presbyterian. And as we moved around, I was going to different churches, but primarily still Methodist or Presbyterian. And then I married a Catholic. That turned things upside down, but that happened a lot in my family. And then I also I joined the Congregational UCC church. But on my path, people might say, I think there are many others that do this, and some people say, oh, you were lost. I was never lost. I was curious. I was trying to understand what religion is, and at that time I was just being exposed to organized religion. And I was always welcomed at any church that I went into, met wonderful people, good, generous things happening. But I realized at the same time that there was not a conversation about it, that even though that I could see we all have more in common than we do different, but we still seek to divide, at each church I attended, and I didn't understand why that needed to be, because we're greater than that. And even when I came to this valley, I must have gone to 12 different churches just trying to find a place where I felt at home. And Aspen Chapel was the place for me. And the difference for me from this long path is that conversation is welcome. You are invited to be here for who you are. The faith traditions you bring with you are welcome because they are part of who you are at this point. And we have an opportunity now to learn, to share, to converse about things, so you can continue your own unique path. And so that's how I came to be here as well as a new member, and I'm thoroughly grateful and enjoy it. Today, though, we're talking about spirituality. That's a confusing word. You guys, I think, can shed some light on that. And Nicholas, how do you define spirituality?
Well, I've always used Rowan Williams' definition. Rowan Williams was the Archbishop of Canterbury before this one. And he defines spirituality as the cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. And I like that because it talks about cultivation, which means it's an ongoing, like, agrarian thing.
It's a process.
Yeah, it's a cultivation of a sensitive. It should never be abusive. A sensitive and rewarding. It has to be enriching. And then that key word, relationship. You're having a relationship. What are you having a relationship with? Eternal truth and love. And you're having a relationship with that which is eternally true. You're trying to look and discover that which is eternally true. And love. For me, the best definition of love is really giving with no expectation of return. And, we're given our lives. The universe is given to us really with no expectation of return. So there's a fundamental loving there that's created everything. And so spirituality is that cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. It's an ongoing process of communicating, I think, with the universe, using the language of the universe, which is the language of love.
Wow. So it is opening our hearts.
Yes, it is.
And then opening our minds.
Yeah, I think the thing is that I feel that, as I said, the universe was created out of love. There was no expectation of a return. It occurred. We're given our lives out of that. We appeared. There was no expectation of anything when we appeared. And therefore, there is a language there. There's a creative process. And I feel that if we engage with our lives, with the universe, with that same creative process of love, then we're talking the language of the universe. And we can participate with the universe in that way.
I would certainly affirm what Nicholas has said. I think that's a very good definition. There's so many definitions of spirituality or the word spirit. I like to go back to kind of the root of the word. Spirit is a Latin word, a later Latin word. In our scripture, we have the Hebrew, and I don't profess to be able to pronounce it correctly, but the word in the alliteration is R-U-A-H or R-U-A-C-H, Rauk. And again, I'm not pronouncing it very good, but it means breath. That's the essence of the Hebrew etymology or origin, where we have later on made it Latin, spiritus, but it comes from the Hebrew rauk. And I think it's the breath of life. It's just how we all breathe. It's the essence, the logo, the most essential part of who we are. Is our how we live and move and have our being within this spiritual framework of the universe. And when I say that, I don't think spirit is something off some other place. It's just part of it's a holistic way of looking at spiritual rather than being separatistic. I think it's all of life. Spirit. And even if we divide it up in body, mind, and spirit, that may have some challenges as well. It's a good thing to say, but I see it all as one versus maybe different compartments. And along with his definition that he quoted, I was just all of a sudden reminded of a person who spoke at the chapel, which was a professor of mine from Denver University and Iliff School of Theology named Charles Milligan. And he had this great definition of it. He said, which was really of religion or spirit. It's the vital fusion of myth, ritual, and community. Those three things. And especially of a great truth. Myth was a great story of truth, not some sort of fiction per se. And how we practice that as part of our ritual, and how we live that out in community. And every organization probably has those three parts to it. They have their symbol, their practices or ritual, and how they care for one another in community. The golden rule is most important to spirit.
How do you feel that we have grown spiritually from your early arrival at the chapel
I sure hope we have.
Present time? Yeah.
One of our purposes in our mission statement is promote a progressive spirituality and enrichment for all people and interfaith engagement toward peace. And so I certainly hope it is progressive that we have progressed. I know that I have at the chapel and become more open-minded, feel more secure. One of my purposes has been to make religion real. I know not too many people like. I still like the word religion. I may be the only one left in Aspen who does, but I like the term. It means to bind back, to reconnect ourselves with source is the word religio. And I think we have continued with all the different leaders that we've had bring into the chapel. It's not been one person's church or podium or pulpit.
Yeah, early on you did invite other adjunct pastors in to be a part of the conversation.
Many who were there with us for a long period of time. People came in situationally. It's that diversity of spiritual teachers that have, I think, made the chapel what it is and how it's progressed in its... I'm proud to be... what shall I say? My wife tells me not to use these terms too much, but to be open or liberal and progressive in a philosophical approach. Religion has got to coincide with everything, all the empirical knowledge we have in science. It has to fit in within the greater realms of meaning and understanding in life. It can't be separate.
You also had a strong program of community outreach.
We have. I think Nicholas is carrying that in a great way. We certainly did do a lot of outreach. I was part of starting the buddy program and the chapel. We did a lot of things at the hospital, and we tried to integrate ourselves with the community. We started having the Easter service on the mountain. I did other services on the mountain. We've always tried to have the chapel be part of the community, not a separate entity in a corner someplace, but at the entrance of Aspen, and we opened to all the weddings and the memorials and counseling. Anyone who came through the door, I wanted to welcome. It's an open door policy. We have open hearts and open mind and an open door as part of the chapel. So we did that. I was also concerned to try to get a base of people. We didn't have anyone when I was first there, but to slowly get people who were part of the chapel and I could identify with it. We don't have a formal membership, but they still feel at home there. And after that, then we can reach out more. And Nicholas is doing a really good job having many other programs at the chapel that are reaching out in the community today.
Now, there are people that, I hear this a lot, who will say, I am spiritual, but I'm not religious. What does that mean in these times? And what is the place for people who find themselves in that situation within the chapel community?
Go ahead now.
Well, I think, if you look at the figures now, the largest grouping of people are nuns, people who have no religious affiliation at all. And I think there is a great spiritual hunger out there. People are looking for meaning. They're looking for purpose in their lives. And I don't think religion has got a really, it's not had that good a press over the last period of time. Wars, difficulties, having to believe this, having to believe that. And I think people have pushed back against that. But I think there is still this yearning for understanding and yearning for knowledge. And I think, obviously, the thing with the chapel, it looks like a chapel, it smells like a chapel. So when you walk in there, it probably has got something to do with religion in there. But I think, we'd acknowledge the fact that we are in that area. We are in the area of looking at ultimate truth, looking at what the meaning of life is, which is the sort of area of religion. But I think, what we're trying to say is that you don't really have to believe anything. There's nothing that we say, you've got to believe this. Transubstantiation, no, you don't have to believe that. You don't have to believe anything. It's much more about showing up in your own presence. And each individual has their own path, and we want to encourage them to look at what's going to work for them to have their lives be deeper, more satisfying, and make a contribution to society.
I really like what you said. I just was listening to Elaine Pagels on video on her new book, Why Religion? She's a professor at Princeton, and she's taught at the chapel a number of times. One of my favorite teachers. But she said, when someone asked her about that same question, she said belief was overrated. Now, in religion, that's a pretty crazy thing to say. But I think in some ways it's not just about, so many people have narrowed their denomination or their belief or their Christianity for that matter with just what you believe. Your belief is it. And if you believe a little bit different from my belief, we're in conflict with each other. So belief is important, but even more so, it's how we are caring for one another and how we are loving, how we are practicing that in our lives. And then she reiterated that as well in how, and she attends the monastery out here, and she would still identify herself. I don't know if she'd identify herself as a Christian, but certainly spiritual in her own way. But I just thought it was interesting with what Nicholas just said, and then when Elaine said that it was overrated, I thought, well, that's really interesting, and I would agree with her. She is the most endearing person, and I hope that she might be able to be at the chapel again this summer.
I think we do hold the idea that at the chapel that, first of all, disagreement is not seen as being threatening.
Right.
Exactly.
Disagreement is not threatening.
Right.
And also the other thing we hold dear is that what we offer what we offer at the chapel with the willingness to be wrong. So there is the willingness to be wrong there. I love the thing the Dalai Lama said. He was asked, what would you do if someone came to you and conclusively proved that reincarnation did not exist? And he said, I would change my views accordingly.
Oh, interesting.
So I think we do,
yes.
we're not fixed on that way. I think that's important.
Yeah, we have to be open to the fact that we don't know it all.
Yeah.
No one
Exactly,
knows it all.
yes.
And Nicholas has mentioned that in his messages. And I love the thing from the Tao Te Ching was, I believe it's in there. It says, those who think they know don't know. It's only those who know that they really don't know who know. You got to unpack that a little bit. But
you even said it correctly.
It's really, and I've gone to, I've gone to a lot of school in my life, but it's the old axiom: the more you learn, the more you realize that you really don't fully know. It's for all of us to approach our faith as humbly as we can, and realize that we are all just looking. There are always a few more questions than answers. But and part of our faith is coming down to living out the best that we can and serving.
Now, Nicholas, you've brought a lot of fresh momentum to the chapel in your 5 years here, including your wonderful Developing Consciousness course, which right now is going to be running at the 3rd Street Center starting tonight, I believe, and it's free. Tell us about that and other innovative programs and ideas that have come during your tenure here and your vision for going forward, where we are.
Well, I have to say that, I was saying to Gregg on the way over, I'm very grateful to him. He built the train set, and I can now play with it, really. So I think,
You've got a new conductor.
I think really, I have to acknowledge that this community has been built by Gregg and by the community together. And I'm so grateful for that. And that's just worth such a huge amount. And I've really, there's a vision there that was created by the community and Gregg. And it just so happened that the sort of shaped hole of person that they wanted to be, I just fitted in there because I had the sort of similar sort of perspective. And I mean, I've always been interested in that whole idea of consciousness, of spirituality, and how it all worked. And I think when I started off, getting involved in this, I went off to India and did this sort of went off to Kathmandu and did all that sort of stuff, almost a hippie trail. And I didn't think much had changed. I came back and my mother told me that she knew something was up when I claimed to be vegetarian and I was wearing Indian clothes when I came off the plane. And really I was looking for, spirituality. And, in those days, this was 1979, it was all about enlightenment. And I just wanted to know what it was about. And people would come up, I said, well, what's it all about? And they, I had to meditate for this long, or, join my religion, or do this. No one ever actually said, this is what it's about. This is the roadmap of what this area is. And so, having done this for a while, I wanted to create something that really just set out the roadmap of what areas were involved in the whole spirituality thing. So it's that really impelled me to start the Developing Consciousness course, which is really looking at spirituality from the perspective of ordinary reality. How do you look at consciousness? How do you look at the nature of reality? Where does that fit? Where does the mind fit into that? You know, what does enlightenment mean anyway? So the course really was to give people an opportunity to reflect on those areas. So we do it over 8 weeks, and it's now at the 3rd Street Centre at Carbondale. Starts tonight, and 8 weeks, people can drop in every Wednesday, 6 till 7:30. It's an hour and a half. It's free. And you really come along with your own life and just reflect on that. So that has been a big driver to do for me to sort of move forward.
I'm sorry, we have to call this to a close, this conversation. We're just getting started, and I hope we can continue another time. But
you mentioned the April 11th.
Yes, for those of you who are able, we'll be continuing this conversation on April 11th, next Thursday, at the Aspen Chapel. You can find more information online at aspenchapel.org. And please come share the conversation again anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Shelley.
Bye-bye.